Maps are powerful tools that shape our understanding of the world, but they are far from neutral. They reflect the perspectives, biases, and intentions of their creators. One of the most striking examples of this is the way Africa is depicted on traditional world maps. Africa, the second largest continent on Earth, spans an astounding 30.37 million square kilometers, equal to 11.7 million square miles. Large enough to fit the United States, China, India, and much of Europe within its borders. Yet, it is consistently portrayed as smaller and less significant than its actual size. This distortion is not just a cartographic oversight. It is a deliberate manifestation of racism and prejudice designed to minimize Africa and its people, perpetuating narratives of inferiority and insignificance. This is Black Untold, the misconception of the world map. The map most people are familiar with, the Mercator projection, was developed by Gerardus Mercator in 1569. While it was invaluable for navigation, preserving angles and straight lines to help sailors chart their courses, it grossly distorted the relative sizes of land masses. Regions near the equator, such as Africa, appear much smaller, while areas farther from the equator, like Europe and North America, are exaggerated in size. On a Mercator map, Greenland is depicted as being roughly the same size as Africa, despite the fact that Africa is about 14 times larger. These distortions are not merely technical flaws. They are rooted in Eurocentric perspectives that have been weaponized to uphold white supremacy. The intentional minimization of Africa on these maps aligns with historical efforts to demean and marginalize African nations and their people. For centuries, colonial powers exploited Africa for its resources while simultaneously erasing its cultural and historical significance. The distorted depiction of Africa on world maps served as a visual reinforcement of these prejudices. By making Africa appear smaller, cartographers and the colonial systems they served sent a subtle yet powerful message. Africa is less important, less powerful, and less capable than other regions of the world. This was not just a matter of geography. It was a deliberate strategy to assert dominance and justify exploitation. This cartographic deception further served to undermine African agency and achievements. Africa is the cradle of humanity, the birthplace of some of the world's earliest and most advanced civilizations, including ancient Egypt, Nubia, and the Kingdom of Mali. Its vast natural resources, from gold to diamonds to oil, have driven global economies for centuries. Yet, these contributions were overshadowed by a narrative that painted Africa as a primitive, underdeveloped continent in need of salvation by Western powers. The way Africa is depicted on maps reinforced this narrative, making it easier to dismiss the continent's significance and justify the subjugation of its people. This visual marginalization is part of a broader pattern of systemic racism that has sought to devalue Africa and Africans. Just as colonial powers used physical violence and economic exploitation to dominate African nations, they also employed cultural tools, such as maps, to shape perceptions and maintain control. The distorted depiction of Africa on maps is a prime example of how prejudice operates not only through overt acts of oppression, but also through subtler, insidious forms of bias that infiltrate everyday life. The effects of this cartographic bias are far-reaching. Maps are used in education, shaping the way children learn about the world. When students see a map that minimizes Africa's size, they may internalize the idea that Africa is less significant than other continents. This distorted perception can carry into adulthood, influencing everything from international policy decisions to the way people view Africa and its people. The psychological impact of these distortions cannot be underestimated, as they perpetuate a sense of inferiority among Africans and people of African descent, while reinforcing a false sense of superiority among Western nations. Fortunately, efforts to correct these distortions are gaining momentum. Alternative map projections, such as the Gall-Peters projection, more accurately represent the relative sizes of land masses. The Gall-Peters map shows Africa's true scale, highlighting its vastness and importance. Interactive tools like the True Size Of website allow users to compare countries' actual sizes, providing a stark contrast to the misleading proportions of the Mercator projection. These tools are essential for challenging the misconceptions that have been perpetuated for centuries. However, changing the way Africa is represented on maps is only part of the solution. It is equally important to address the underlying biases and narratives that have contributed to these distortions. This means acknowledging the role of white supremacy in shaping our understanding of geography and history, and actively working to dismantle these prejudices. It also means celebrating Africa's rich cultural heritage, its historical achievements, and its ongoing contributions to the world. The depiction of Africa on traditional world maps is not just a matter of cartographic convenience. It is a reflection of centuries of racism, prejudice, and deliberate attempts to minimize Africa's significance. By distorting Africa's size, these maps have reinforced narratives of inferiority and justified exploitation. Recognizing and addressing these distortions is a crucial step toward reclaiming Africa's rightful place in the world and challenging the biases that continue to shape our perceptions. Africa is not just a continent, it is a symbol of resilience, richness, and humanity. It deserves to be represented with truth and respect. Representation is about honoring the truth and ensuring that future generations grow up with a fuller, more accurate understanding of the world. Maps are not just tools for navigation, they are reflections of power, history, and identity. By questioning and correcting the distortions, we move closer to a more just and inclusive vision of our world. Let this episode inspire you to look deeper, to ask harder questions, and to demand better representations of the truth, whether in geography, history, or culture. Africa is not just a landmass, it is the cradle of civilization, a beacon of resilience, and a source of unmeasurable wealth and creativity. Its story deserves to be told in full. Stay informed, stay empowered, and remember, the way we see the world shapes the way we treat it, and each other.